Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedComms So you'll find information, resources, services, activities for people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and the associated businesses. It's a global community. So wherever in the world you are, hopefully you'll find information of interest. We're running a lot of these webinars. And again, today we've got a nice international audience online with us for today's discussion. We're going to have a presentation. We're going to have a Q&A session with the guys from Lucid, with Olivia and James. This is all about diversity, attracting a diverse workforce into MedComms. We've run a number of webinars on this topic, and it starts with a recruitment policy, I guess. So it's great that you guys have come in to talk to us about your policies at Lucid, and to explain the ways in which you've developed the processes that you are now implementing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to James to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm James Haq-Myles. I'm the head of culture, sustainability and engagement at the Lucid Group. I'm very much passionate about creating opportunities for people of all abilities and ensuring that organizations are truly accessible to candidates with disabilities. In my kind of career history, I've spent time as a disability recruitment transformation consultant, transforming the accessibility recruitment strategies for banks like Barclays and BNP Paribas. But I was previously head of diversity and inclusion for Travelex, so led accessibility recruitment strategies in the US, Japan, UK, India, and Brazil. So I'll be bringing on some of my experience from previous roles, but also touching on the work that we're doing at Lucid as well today. Olivia, would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'm Olivia Emirali. I've been with Lucid Group for, I think it's my 4-year anniversary this week, although I will have to check that. So my role here is I head up our talent acquisition function and also our HR operations side of things too. So I actually particularly came invested and interested in the disability confidence scheme that we have implemented here once James came on board. I think it's fair to say I had no awareness of the scheme prior to James joining the team, and really through kind of talking to him and understanding a bit more about how many people within the workforce and outside of the workforce are impacted by disability. That was definitely something that struck my interest, as ultimately, I think any way that we can support people is the right thing to do. So we do have some slides to share today. We're okay to go ahead with those, Peter? Cool. So let me move across. We've done our intros, and lovely sunny James there on holiday.
Yeah, I was in Italy.
Cool. Over to you, James.
Amazing. Thank you, Olivia. So before we go into the scheme mechanics around disability confident, I thought it was important just to lay some initial context around the legislation for disability inclusion in the UK. Now, the cornerstone of equality protection in the UK is the Equality Act of 2010, which legally protects people from discrimination and in wider society. And it provides protection for what it calls protected characteristics. And you can see disability is explicitly stated here as a protected characteristic. However, when we are looking at the definition of a disability under the Equality Act, it is a physical or a mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative impact on your ability to carry out daily activities. So why is this important? In certain countries around the world, the definition of disability is condition-based, which means you have a list of conditions, and if the condition is on that list, then someone is legally classified as having a disability. In the UK and US, it's impact-based, which means pretty much any health condition could be legally protected or classified as a disability. When we are defining substantial, it's more than minor or trivial, meaning that it would take someone much longer to complete a daily task or activity like getting dressed. And long-term means more than 12 months, for example, a breathing condition that develops as a result of a lung infection. However, it is important to note that under the Equality Act, certain conditions are expressly deemed to be disabilities. That can include blindness and severe disfigurement, sight impairments, and cancer and HIV infection, and multiple sclerosis. Whilst we're moving forward throughout the rest of this presentation, we're going to be focusing on the support element of disability confident, but really did think it's important to ground ourselves in the fact that disability as a term can be much broader than we initially think of it being, and it is enshrined in legislation. Next slide, please, Olivia. Now, I wanted to take some time to walk you through the medical and social model for disability and accessibility inclusion. And this is really important from a mindset perspective to think about how we're approaching this conversation today. So the medical model essentially was the old way of looking at disability, and it was essentially viewing the individual as having the disability, whereas accessibility kind of rights groups created the social model. And the social model says that someone doesn't have a disability because they're in a wheelchair. They have a disability because the world is inaccessible to them. For example, it's because there aren't wheelchair ramps present, because if everything was there to support the individual, they would be able to fully participate in work and in their environment. So the social model puts the emphasis on the environment to support the individual and to make the adjustments to enable someone to, have a fully participatory life. And that can include removing barriers in the workplace and socially, challenging stereotypes and discrimination, providing flexibility where appropriate. And again, that can include adjustments, which we're going to come a little bit more into later. And actually just taking a person-centric approach and knowing that whilst we're talking about quite broad themes today, it's really about understanding what does that individual need to provide the right support so that they could participate in the workforce, and focusing on them as a unique person as opposed to a category. So I'd like us to adopt the social model as we move through the rest of this session today. Next slide, please, Olivia. Now, I also think it's important for us just to deep dive into some context around neurodiversity. So we can define neurodiversity as understanding human cognitive differences and variances in the human genome to be a natural form of diversity, as opposed to be something to be, treated or managed. And that's really important to note, because there's a bit of a kind of philosophical conflict around how we speak about neurodiversity and equality legislation. So, for example, if someone was on the autism spectrum or dyslexic or had dyspraxia, they would classify as potentially being neurodiverse. You have neurodiversity and neurotypical. It's important, though, for employers to understand that whilst someone may be neurodiverse, that could qualify as a disability under the Equality Act. However, not all neurodivergent people will consider themselves as having a disability, because that's kind of counterintuitive to the concept of neurodiversity in itself. So as we move through the rest of the session, again, it's about a sensitivity point here. We're talking about disability in a legal context and kind of the requirements around employers, but not all individuals will actually identify as having a disability that may be eligible to apply through these schemes or eligible to receive the support. And this is the rainbow infinity symbol that is the international symbol for neurodiversity. And there's a bit of a link here about clearing up some misconceptions about neurodiversity in the workplace, because we have to understand that whilst someone may be neurodiverse and that may have certain behavioral manifestations, it's about supporting that individual and not necessarily just grouping them into a particular category, because that's not inclusive. So again, just a philosophical point here before we deep dive into the scheme mechanics later on. Next slide, please, Olivia. Olivia, now over to you.
Me. Okay, so one of the things that we've looked at is this disability as part of our D&I strategy, which has many pillars that we'll talk a bit about later in terms of what else we're doing within the D&I space. But one of the reasons that we prioritised this and kind of felt it was really important to us as an organisation, but also to us as individuals, is because supporting people with disabilities provides us access to a wider talent pool, and also is the right thing to do. It enables us to be a force of good in the world. And some of the statistics here that I was talking about earlier that really kind of drew me to the importance of this scheme are listed here. So those include kind of 1 in 5 of the people within the working age population are classed as having a disability. Personally, I found that statistic higher than I had previously anticipated or appreciated. Over 1 billion people live with some form of disability in the world today. So that's 15% of the world population. And actually the employment rate for people with disabilities is lower. So it's 53% compared to 82% for non-disabled. And about 85% of people within the working age population with a disability or chronic illness have actually acquired that disability whilst at work as well. So the next thing we actually want to talk through is the scheme itself. So Disability Confident is a scheme run by the UK government to support organisations recruiting and retaining people with disabilities. It really helps also people within that community identify who's committed to enhancing diversity within the workplace. The scheme itself has 3 levels that are designed to support employers. So these are 1, 2, and 3. So we've joined at Disability Confident Committed, that's the level 1, and that's where all organisations who wish to join the scheme join at. The real difference between and we'll go into what it means to be level 1, but the real difference between 2 and 3 is really just further embedding the processes and ways of working and looking at how auditing around that. But really, as we've looked at Disability Confident level 1, that's where the main potential changes may be within your recruiting practices. For us, we started talking about this last year, and therefore we decided to announce and share that we are joining Disability Confident scheme around the time that it was also an International Day of Persons with Disability. And that's marked by the United Nations internationally on December the 3rd. So that'll be the same this year. So we joined the scheme then, and what we're going to talk you through next is a few things about preparation that we did from that, both internally and externally, and also how we're further embedding the scheme. So there are a number of commitments that you have under the level 1 membership, and you have 3 years to do that. So it's a pretty a decent time allowed to make these changes. So one of those, and the first one, is making sure recruitment processes are inclusive and accessible. So ensuring that we're against discrimination, making job adverts accessible, and also accepting applications in alternative formats such as electronic, which I think most of us are probably doing now anyway. So one of the ways that we did that is really look at our job descriptions, make sure it was really clear what our requirements were when it came to our incoming hires, what were desirable characteristics, and what were those must-have characteristics as well. So people are really clear there. Another thing that we need to do is communicate and promote those jobs that we have on offer here at Lucid, and how that would join the scheme as well. So doing that through a range of different channels. And one of the things that we can now do, having joined the scheme, is actually use the Disability Confident badge on all of our job advertising collateral. We also committed to positive action. And so what that means in terms of the scheme is guaranteeing an interview to anyone who meets the essential criteria for our roles and has indicated that they are advertising to us, applying to us under the scheme. So if someone indicates through our recruitment process that they are applying with a disability and they meet our criteria, we will guarantee them an interview. We also looked at what reasonable adjustments we may need to make. So both in the workplace, but also to candidates. And so that's something that we actively ask candidates to share with us what reasonable adjustments they may require. And it's really important when we think about this is actually candidates and employees know what adjustments they need. They're the experts, and so they can share that with them so we can then support that. Number 5, support any existing employee who requires a disability or long-term health condition, and that can be through the reasonable adjustment process that James is going to talk a bit about later, and also through using occupational health providers as well. And also lastly is paid employment, so committing to offering paid employment to people with disabilities, and ultimately increasing our workforce population there. So a number of different things that we have talked about before launching and have since embedding. So some of the processes that we needed to review as an organisation, and if you're looking to kind of join the scheme, maybe what you need to think about as well, was really our occupational health support and providers and what assessments that we need there. So the team have really been focusing on that this year as well. We took a bit of time to really make sure within our job adverts, we've split out those essential and desirable criteria. And that was a really good exercise for us to go through internally and really kind of challenge managers and really think about, okay, what do we actually need in our new hires? James and the team did quite a lot of work around kind of supporting line managers with us joining the scheme. What does that mean? What type of language should we be using as well? James has actually got a slide later, because I think kind of people are always a bit wary about what they can say and not say. So we thought it was something that might be helpful to include. And then also, as I said, we looked at what adjustments we needed to make within the process, within our onboarding, and then as employees join us as well. So I'm going to hand over to James now, who's going to talk about the type of adjustments.
Thank you, Olivia. So under the Equality Act of 2010, we have a legal obligation to provide reasonable adjustments, but it's not just about the legal obligation. I think we have a moral obligation as well. In the US, people use the language of accommodations as opposed to adjustments, but we'll be using the language of adjustments today. So an adjustment is essentially a change that is made to a procedure, protocol, or practice that enables someone with a disability or health condition to kind of perform in their role. Now, in some instances, an occupational health assessment may be required. Now, that means going to your occupational health provider, the colleague essentially completing an interview and having an occupational health assessment, and a report being generated that makes specific recommendations aligned to their health condition. And that could be things such as assistive technology, ways of working, or even approaches to work. Now, under the Equality Act, the language speaks about making adjustments that are reasonable. Now, that's designed to ensure that there's the balance between colleague support, but also factoring in the limitations that can exist within business, both from a practicality perspective, budget perspective, and fairness on other individuals as well. For example, adjustments are deemed to be reasonable if they are appropriate for supporting that specific disability or health condition. How kind of practical those changes would be. For example, if someone was a lifeguard and they had a particular health condition, which meant they wouldn't be able to go in and actually save the individuals in the swimming pool, for example, then the business could refuse adjustments on that grounds because it wouldn't be appropriate for the nature of the service provision. That's a really specific example, but I think that illustrates the balance between what's reasonable and not reasonable. Another example would be whether the change would actually overcome the disadvantage. So would someone actually be providing an adjustment that's going to solve the actual support need that someone needs? And if it doesn't, then the business can say, actually, that's not reasonable. The cost of the adjustment, and then actually if any previous changes have been made. Now, as a rule, my position on all of this is that if we are saying no to an adjustment because it's not reasonable, it's about finding an alternative adjustment in partnership with the individual. So using the concept of reasonability to find the right level adjustment as opposed to saying no. It's about working out what's the best thing for the business, for the individual, and other members of the team. Now, types of adjustments can include doing things another way, such as allowing someone with social anxiety to have their own desk instead of hot desking, changes to physical features, for example, wheelchair ramps, supporting equipment such as special braille keyboards or other supportive technology, or differences in work patterns, for example, breaks or flexible and phased returns to work. Next slide, please, Olivia. Before we actually come to this slide, I do think it's important to note that on the subject of adjustments, in many instances, colleagues have been speaking about this for a substantial period of time, be that their whole lives, or be that since they have acquired their disability. So in many instances, the colleague will know what adjustments they need, and they may actually have a preferred process, preferred supplier, or preferred form of equipment. In some instances, as Olivia said, 85% of people with disabilities have acquired those disabilities while working. So then it may be that they don't know and they do need some support. So it really is about taking that person-centric approach to adjustments, and knowing that an adjustment for one person wouldn't be a suitable adjustment for someone else. So whilst all of these examples are here to be illustrative, you really do need to take that social model, person-centric approach. Yeah, next slide, please, Olivia. Thank you. Now, this is some examples and guiding principles for disability or ability inclusive language. Now, again, because we're taking that person-centric approach, there may be some people who don't agree with this these recommendations, and there may be some people that do. It's all about using the language of the person. However, this language recommendations have come from the likes of Scope and Business Disability Forum and Accessibility Human Rights groups. So some examples of guiding principles. Avoid phrases or language that suggests someone is frail or the object of pity, i.e. they suffer with or they are a victim of. Avoid collective nouns to describe people with disabilities, i.e. saying the blind or the disabled, as it implies that they are part of a uniform and homogenous group. Conscious that for this session today, we are talking about people with disabilities, but we're doing that so that we can have this candid discussion. We're not speaking about any individuals. So this is about speaking about individuals as opposed to the theme or the topic. Thirdly, never assume that you know the assistance that someone will require. Always ask someone if and what assistance may be needed. A practical example here, if someone's in a wheelchair, you should always think of their wheelchair as an extension of their body. In the same way, you wouldn't just go up and kind of start touching someone's body inappropriately in a workplace. You should never just go up and start touching someone's wheelchair and assuming that they need support. It's all about empowering that person to tell you what support they need. Next slide, please, Olivia. Now, again, these are some practical examples from the Business Disability Forum, which is a human rights group in the UK, and they offer some really effective tools and materials. And they also offer accessibility audits as well, if your organization is looking to take your accessibility strategy to the next level. I'm not being paid by the Business Disability Forum for this call out. I just really love their services and the work that they do. Now, again, it's about having a person-centric approach and remembering that you need to use the language of the person, but just some guiding principles here. And I think these can also be important from an internal comms perspective when you're going to be writing about disability or speaking about it in any training. Less inclusive, the disabled, more inclusive, people with disabilities, because you're putting the person first and the disability second. Less inclusive, wheelchair bound, more inclusive, wheelchair user. Less inclusive, the handicapped, more inclusive, person with a disability. Less inclusive, suffers from, again, because it's bringing back to that kind of object of pity, and more person that has asthma. Less inclusive, mental handicap, more inclusive, learning disability. Less inclusive, able-bodied, more inclusive, non-disabled, because saying someone's able-bodied is implying that someone with a disability isn't able, and that's not the point of this at all. The whole point of the social model is that everyone can be able, given the right level of adjustments. I see some comments coming through there. Let's pick those up at the end. But yeah, keep them coming through, please. Next slide, please, Olivia. Okay, so what's next? Olivia, would you like to walk through some of the what's next?
So we just thought it would be useful to share with you some of the things that we're doing kind of next. So I'll probably take the bottom two, actually. James will take the top two. But really for us, we only joined the scheme in December. So given we're, well, bang on, joining March today, it's relatively new for us. So we need to do some further embedding of the scheme and making sure that we're supporting people as well. Both candidates, employees, but also our line managers, so that they really feel supported, making sure they feel comfortable using the right language that James was just talking us through. So really for us, we're going to really focus on our level 1 commitments and further embed the changes that we've made. But aside from that, we've got some wider D&I initiatives which James might speak to, as well as our value evolution as well.
Oh, I think I paused there. Back to me, Olivia.
Back to you.
Sorry, I thought I'd frozen there. So in terms of our wider DE&I initiatives, as Olivia said, we're looking at an extensive DE&I strategy. So looking at positive action programs relating to gender, programs around neurodiversity, and also given that Disability Confident is a UK-only scheme, we're partnering with human rights groups and NGOs in the US, so we can extend and amplify our commitment there as well, and get that support in doing so. We're also looking at how we can create a group-wide set of values that truly unite us across our organisation. And we're creating a documentary film around how we're approaching all of that, so we can story tell about the work that we're doing, kind of explain to candidates about our commitment to accessibility, inclusion, and really living our values in a way that's engaging for people. So lots more to come in that space, and we'll be sure to keep you posted on everything that we've got planned.
Yeah,
last slide, please.
Yeah, I think you're just going to wrap up and then we'll go to Q&A.
Amazing. Thanks, Olivia. So I just wanted to, make sure that we take a moment here to reflect on the fact that Disability Confident is more than just a scheme. It's a mindset and a commitment. So it's not just about joining disability confident. You have to become disability confident. You have to become confident in speaking about disability. You have to become confident in speaking about adjustments, because if you feel stigmatized in having the conversation and you're too worried about saying the wrong thing, that's why there is a higher unemployment rate for people with disabilities, because line managers can be nervous about saying the wrong thing, or they're worried about how the adjustments are going to actually practically be applied. And actually, it's about us as individuals understanding what we can do to support people, but also educating ourselves, taking the time to read materials, taking the time to understand inclusive language. Then also, if you make a mistake, apologize, move on and educate yourself. Don't make the experience of the individual about your mistake. Make the experience of the individual about being inclusive, supporting them and going on an accessibility journey. And if you have that positive intent and that positive mindset, it's likely the individual is going to want to support you in that process as well. And you can go on that journey with your colleagues.
So I think we're going back over to you, Peter, to lead some of the Q&A. So I'll stop sharing.
Fantastic. Yeah, Lisa, that's great. Actually, fantastic, guys. Thank you very much. Very interesting. It's interesting, some of the comments and questions that are coming in, which we can come to some of those, but it's also, from my point of view, it's just interesting seeing how some of the discussions around language and people interpret language in different ways, and that's one of the problems with these sorts of discussions. And it's good to be talking about it, and we shouldn't be afraid of getting something a little bit wrong and then learning from each other and all the rest of it, I guess, is what I'm saying there. But it's just interesting looking at some of those comments. A couple of quick questions, if I can, and sorry, to the audience, please keep going. We've got the chat box, we've got the Q&A box. Feed your questions and comments in, and we'll try and weave those into the discussion for the next 10 minutes or so. Can I just ask one basic, obvious question, I think, at this stage? I know this webinar is about the UK's disability confidence scheme, as it were, but we have got an international audience. So do you know, James, I'm looking at you more, but I know you've got international experience. How do schemes vary around the world? I don't know. You see what I'm saying? I mean, what sort of lessons are directly comparable, and what variations are there in the way people go about these things? Can you just talk to that for a couple of minutes?
Happy to. So we're very lucky in the UK because the Disability Confidence Scheme is very much a unique scheme in that it's completely free of charge. Okay. It's very open. The information is readily available. In Europe, in continental Europe, it can be quite difficult for organizations to implement accessibility and disability hiring strategies, just because of more privacy law around how you ask candidates and colleagues about disability information and other diversity characteristics. There are schemes that exist. It's just more complex to navigate. Again, in the US, because it's a lot more litigious there from a kind of workplace perspective, it can be a bit more complex, and there isn't kind of federal level scheme. There are, however, state level schemes, but I would recommend partnering specifically with disability and human rights NGOs, because that achieves a number of things. You get access to the best practice expertise. They've done this before. Thirdly, the money that you're paying to them isn't going to a private sector organization. It's going into funding grassroots work to support people with disabilities and health conditions. So if you're dining into this from a country where there isn't a scheme like Disability Confident, Google disability NGOs, disability support groups in your local area, get in conversations with them, and they'll have lots of mechanisms that you can partner on.
Okay. Again, possibly a simple question. I just don't know the answer to this. Sorry, but if I'm looking at organisations that are or aren't part of this scheme, is there a database? Is it as simple as you're now listed in a database, a government database, and I can go and say, right, Lucid is there and someone else isn't there? I don't know how transparent this sort of information is.
Yeah, so I think it's less about, there's no essentially entry requirements to join. It's once you completed the 3 years of the level 1 commitments, then you're meant to go on and
Sorry, James, we're losing you there. Just try again.
Yeah, I think we're starting to lose James there. We're in the same building, so let's hope that doesn't happen to me. So, but no. So essentially, what happens as we've joined the scheme, we can now use the logo on our own website, on our own advertising, and so we've done that, and also kind of detailed what our inclusion policies are around that. And I can see one of the questions in there was around actually where are we advertising given our changes here. So we've mainly done it on our own platforms in terms of our website, but also the kind of standard LinkedIn, but using the kind of wording from the scheme and the logo there. Also looking at, and some other people might have heard of this platform, Even Break as well. So that's a advertising platform that can designed to kind of help with expanding talent pools.
Okay, and James, are you back?
James back as well now.
Hi, yes, I'm back.
So and I'm just sorry to pin you down on this, but can I go to that government database and check what companies are part of this scheme? I think we lost you, James, when you were answering that bit. I get the fact that we can look at your website and see that you are part, but can I do it the other way around?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you can. I think though the way that they track it is more around how if you fulfilled the commitments, because anyone can join the scheme. But then it's about after 3 years completing an audit process, verifying that you've completed them. And actually, if you want to move up to level 3, you have to get one of the verified partners to do the audit for you. And that can include companies like Business Disability Forum. So that's when more of the verification and checking comes in. Level 1 to sign up is very much just, it's a commitment, but actually you should fulfill that commitment. But yeah, the checking comes in later on.
Okay. And just as a general comment, again, I don't know what you're going to say or what the answer is, if you know, across medical communications, healthcare communications, our sort of business, to be honest, I don't know of many companies that I could think of where I'm aware that they are part of this scheme and they've talked about that. Have you any awareness across our business sector of how many people or you know, how common it is for people to be part of this scheme or not?
Yeah, we don't. No, we don't. It's not something that we commonly see, and that's one of the reasons that we kind of wanted to come today, Peter, and kind of share about that, because it is something that kind of every organisation can get involved in. Like I was saying earlier, personally feel it's the right thing to do, and it supports community. So no, not sure how widespread it is within our industry, but yeah. I've just seen that they've just signed up. We are.
Yeah, exactly. We've got someone saying they signed up. I'm just curious slightly how the landscape looks. And James, I mean, frankly and bluntly, do you think you need someone like you in an organisation to make this work, or you know, what stage does an organisation start taking on people like yourself in a role to specifically look at this? I suppose the easy answer is, well, it should just be embedded from day one, but there are practical challenges, I guess. Have you got an answer to that or a view on that?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm very candid with you, I believe that obviously any organization can join schemes like this, and any organization with the right level of commitment to understand the needs of colleagues and candidates with disabilities, who's willing to put into place the practices, procedures, policies, embed them, and achieve these scheme commitments. What I have seen, unfortunately, in my career, I used to go into many, you know, large multinational banks who had joined schemes like this. They done the kind of song and dance at the beginning, but then there was turnover, people had forgotten it. I had many recruiters. I was working for some large banks in Canary Wharf, and the recruiters didn't know anything about the scheme. Some candidates were applying through the schemes and it was just being ignored, the fact that they applied through the scheme, because no one knew about it. So that's why it really is a commitment, and it's a mindset piece, because you have to live this. You can't just do it once. It's something that has to be embedded in your processes. And I think that's why Disability Confident is effective, because you're not creating a whole new recruitment process. You're embedding it into BAU recruitment through adjustments, which makes it even more powerful. But it needs to be embedded in someone's role. Someone has to be accountable for this. You need someone with the technical expertise, or you're going to invest in giving someone the technical expertise to understand these things. If you have a DE&I lead who isn't comfortable speaking about disability or accessibility, neurodiversity, it's not going to take off.
Right. Okay. And on that point then, again, I'll stick with James just for the moment. I mean, in terms of bringing a scheme like this into a company like Lucid and talking to the managers, and there's obviously got to be a program of activity there. What have you done, or what tips can you provide? But can I just there's one thing that's going through my head, because some people watching this won't know who Lucid is. Can you actually just, in a couple of sentences, as it were, describe Lucid, the size of Lucid? Sorry, I just think we should just give that little bit of a picture there. Can you do that, James?
I can do, but actually, I think one of just going was
Olivia.
Olivia was instrumental in getting Disability Confident activated at the Lucid Group, and really was a key champion. I've been in the business for 6 months. It was her sponsorship, her passion, and her belief in doing the right thing that really helped us to activate this. So Olivia, I want to personally shout out you for that, but also just let you answer this question, because you were the one who championed all of that.
Sure. So a bit about Lucid Group. We I'm not on mute right now. So kind of numbers wise, we're coming up to 500 people, split between the UK and the US. So we're originally kind of predominantly within the MedComms space, whereas now we're kind of branching out into new capabilities, including kind of new acquisitions, our most recent being a consulting in terms of Cinetic. So we're kind of multi-capability healthcare solutions provider, really. And so about 250 people within the, well, coming up to 300 probably, within the UK, where this scheme particularly impacts, and then the rest of us also on the US side.
Okay, that's just useful to give us some context, I think. So go on then. So in terms of implementing this program within a company like Lucid, just give us some sense of how that's gone and the challenges and the tips you can provide, basically, in terms of there's a number of questions about how do you training courses and how do you get people involved in these sorts of developments. So can you just talk to that for a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did do pretty early on when we knew that we wanted to join the scheme, and I don't think we ever received any resistance to joining the scheme. We all kind of were very committed and knowing that that's the right thing to do. But one of the things that we did need to go through, though, was really how we're going to support people, and just kind of understanding kind of what reasonable adjustments we may make, how we would adapt the recruitment process in terms of collecting data to make sure we're kind of interviewing people, and also make sure that line managers are supported as well with people with disabilities within their teams. So put on some training sessions. So James and people within the team led on those, and we've got content internally as well that we can share. And we've kind of just embedded it from there. One of the other things that has been really instrumental in that is James has worked on improving and updating our inclusion policy as well, and launching that and really making sure people are supported. One of the other things that we've done is really also look at our occupational health provider, and making sure that they're supporting both us but also the individual on getting the right information they need to help them.
The other thing I think that's really important to provide the right support, and it's kind of the next phase. So next week we're going to be launching it's a piece of line manager guidance, and it's entitled Managing and Supporting a Colleague with a Physical or Mental Health Condition. It's about a 15 to 20 page document, and it literally goes all the way through into how do you provide adjustments in a performance management process? How do you provide adjustments in a disciplinary process? How do you provide adjustments in the recruitment process? All the way across the whole colleague life cycle, getting really granular and getting that balance right around business process and application of business process alongside a person-centric approach. So bringing those two worlds together and helping managers understand it's not mutually exclusive, i.e. you can provide someone with performance support and give them feedback whilst providing reasonable adjustments, because what managers tend to find is not getting the balance right between those two things.
Okay. Again, I'm not sure this is a stupid question. I don't think it's a stupid question, but if you bring in a policy like this, Olivia, and you're talking to people about bringing in a policy like this, I mean, it strikes me, again, this has been commented on by a couple of other people. There were people within your organization who are grappling with their own disabilities, however invisible or visible or whatever. Working in an organization, you can feel, there's a lot going on in my life, but I'm not going to tell anyone about it, sort of thing. Yeah. And certainly historically, and it's all very well saying, well, it's good to have the open conversation, but I just wonder whether as you go in this direction, how do you encourage, does it just happen very naturally that people start coming out of the woodwork, as it were, and going, well, actually, I've been here for 5 years, but I've been dealing with this, and if this is going to be happening, then I would like some adjustments for myself, sort of thing. You see what I'm saying? I just wonder how that affects things.
I think we do see that, and I don't necessarily think that is always as a consequence of work that we've been doing. I think that is just naturally how the workplace and world is evolving to be kind of more transparent, to openly talk about challenges that people might be facing. So whilst what we're doing is putting in necessary steps to support people and make people feel confident discussing things, I think we've seen a natural evolution of that over time anyway. So this is just kind of about something to add to support, so people can do that. I don't know if others have found the same within the workplace, but I think definitely over years I've seen that shift.
And I think you're right, Olivia. The other important point I think also to note is, disability confident isn't about saying that everyone has a disability has to now just start like talking to everyone about it. It's about speaking about it in a way where it's also to their benefit. So it's about them knowing that adjustments will be provided, that will be handled sensitively. It will go through a process which is really clear and articulated, and will be sensitive. And actually, I think just, again, getting that balance right as to how the information is shared, because certain adjustments may mean that a line manager needs to know, or a member of the team needs to know if it's about ways of working or flexibility. But disclosing an adjustment doesn't mean you have to disclose someone's health condition. There can be certain instances where you say to the team, actually, in order to support this individual, this is what's going to be happening moving forward, but we're not going to be disclosing anything else, and that should be respected and understood.
Okay. I was looking at Alan's comment earlier on, just to talk about the recruitment process itself. And I've had a quick look at your website, and they've got a couple of avenues to go down, haven't they, if they're applying for a job? I think Alan's sort of saying, at what point do you disclose, and I assume it's in the context of the recruitment process, the disability? I mean, frankly, that's just, I haven't been through the process. Is that just up front, you're just very open about it, and then your system acknowledges and embraces that and deals with it?
So within our recruitment process, we have an application form that we do. People can disclose if they have a disability, and they can say what that is, but they could also ignore that question and just choose to say that to our question where we ask, do you wish to apply to us under the UK Disability Confidence Scheme? Okay. If they clicked yes, we will still go through all our everything that we need to do our side. So we don't at that point know what the disability is, or anything like that. But what we will then do as part of our recruitment process, when we're kind of getting to interview stages and things like that, we will ask, are there any reasonable adjustments that you may need support with? Obviously, again, if the individual wishes to disclose, then they can, or they may just say, actually, I need material sent to me in advance, or whatever it might be. And so it's completely up to them to disclose as much or as little as they want. They can literally just say, yes, I wish to apply as part of under the scheme.
Okay, all right, that's interesting. And just practically, again, from a recruitment point of view, has this opened up new talent pools? I don't know whatever the right word is, but are you very conscious that you're accessing new talent pools because of these sorts of policies that you're putting in? Is that very tangible to you sitting where you're sitting?
I think it's early days in terms of kind of we launched in December, which is relatively quiet for us recruitment folk when everyone kind of gets busy with holidays and everything like that. So it's been early days, but we are starting to see applications pick up. But so early days really on that one, Peter. Okay.
Peter, and so
right. Sorry, James, go on.
Just on that point, I also think it's important, this disability confident, the success of the scheme, it's important obviously to look at new applications, but it's about, the most important thing is supporting existing colleagues, because what you don't want to do is bring lots of colleagues in through the new recruitment process, but not have the processes in place to support them. They don't have an inclusive experience, and then they leave and they're not supported. So always focus on how you're supporting your internal colleagues, policies, the procedures, and then start to make sure you're attracting those new talent pools, because what you don't want to do is bring in loads of new colleagues and don't have the infrastructure to support them. And so I just wanted to comment on Rowena Fung. Hi, Rowena, I can see your comment here, and you sharing that you are living with 2 long-term health conditions. Would just encourage you to speak to someone in your people team confidentially to get the support that you need. I'm not sure what country you're dialing in from, but also just check the equality legislation for the country that you're in. Maybe get some support from a local NGO, or you can reach out to me if you want to have a conversation as well, and hopefully you get the right support for you as well.
Okay, we're a little bit over time as usual, so I'm going to wrap it up there, but that's a point well made, James, that one of the points of these webinars is that people can reach out to each other. I know I can speak for both of you and say you're happy to hear from people. LinkedIn is the easy way of doing it. So thank you both for coming and talking, and thank you to the audience for joining in. Do hook up with each other, as it were. From my point of view, if I can help anybody, you obviously contact me about what we're doing at MedComms.networking.com, or just go and look at the website basically and look at the resources there. But thank you very much. I'm going to wrap it up there and ask the guys just give us a little wave, and then members of the audience, we're here for another 10 minutes or so, don't all rush away. But thank you for the opportunity to have the conversation today, Olivia and James. Thank you. Bye.